When I moved into apartment 3B, I thought I was finally getting my life in order. It had been a rough year, a breakup that left me hollowed out, a job I had slowly grown to hate, and months of living out of suitcases in friends' guest rooms and short-term rentals. I needed somewhere cheap, quiet, and detached from everything that reminded me of the mess I'd left behind. The building was old, red brick, 4 stories tall, tucked between a dentist's office and a dry cleaner that looked like it hadn't cleaned anything since the 90s. The listing was brief and strange. 3rd floor walk-up. Quiet building. No pets. No parties. Serious tenants only. The rent was nearly too good to be true. $680 a month for a 2-bedroom. When I asked the landlord about it, a heavy-set man in his late 60s named Mr. Fillmore, he just waved it off. "We like things quiet here," he said. "Not many folks stick around, but the ones that do don't make trouble." I should have asked more questions. The apartment itself was worn but clean. Wooden floors, a small kitchen with cabinets that stuck, and an old clawfoot tub in the bathroom that I thought gave it some character. The faucets worked, the heat clicked on, and the windows opened. After months of couch surfing and noise, this was peace. Or so I thought. It started the very first night. I couldn't sleep, not because of nerves or nightmares, just a kind of strange restlessness. You know that feeling when you're being watched, even when you know no one's there. That cold coil that curls up your spine and settles behind your neck like breath. It was like that. I tossed and turned for hours, and at some point, I gave up and wandered to the kitchen to get water. The hallway light was out. I made a mental note to replace the bulb. I passed the bathroom on the way, and that's when I heard it. A whistling. Faint. Soft. Coming from a sink. I froze, glass halfway to my mouth. At first, I thought it was wind through the window, but the bathroom door was shut. I stepped closer, holding my breath. The sound wasn't random. It was melodic, like someone gently breathing through their lips, forming a tune. Just 4 or 5 notes. A simple pattern, not quite a song, but deliberate. I opened the bathroom door. The sound stopped instantly. The air felt still and heavy, like walking into a church after the choir's finished. I flicked on the light and stepped inside. The sink was clean. The drain was plugged, not with a stopper, but with something wedged deep down. I could barely see into it, just a small circle of darkness. I ran the tap. Cold water. No sound. I waited a minute, shrugged it off, and went back to bed. But the next night, it happened again. And again the night after that. Always between 1 o'clock and 2 a.m. Always the same pattern, 4 or 5 soft, breathy notes. Not shrill, not frightening on its own, just wrong. I told myself it had to be the pipes. Old buildings always made noises. Maybe it was pressure or expansion, air pockets in the plumbing. I tried to ignore it, but the more I listened, the more I noticed there was a kind of rhythm, as if the sound was responding to me. A pause when I stepped close. A flicker of an extra note when I whispered. On the 5th night, I decided to record it. I set my phone on the bathroom sink with the screen dimmed and the voice memo app running. I closed the door, went back to bed, and waited. 1:11 a.m. Whistling. I crept toward the door, heart racing. The sound was a little louder than before. Sharper. Still soft, but no longer passive. It seemed to build like breath pulled in before a word. I didn't go in. I waited until morning. While I played the recording back, it was almost too faint to hear. I turned up the volume and listened closely. Whistling. Soft. 3 notes. A pause. then a fourth, then a voice, a whisper, barely audible, warped by static. It said, "Are you listening?" After I heard the whisper on the recording, something inside me shifted, not fear exactly, but a wariness, like discovering a crack in the foundation of a house you thought was safe. Something real was happening here, and I couldn't explain it away with logic anymore. Still, I tried. I posted the clip anonymously on a Reddit thread dedicated to weird sounds just to see what others might say. Most people laughed it off: old pipes, air, and the plumbing. Probably your neighbor playing a prank, but one user commented something that made my stomach turn. "Don't whistle back, ever." That was all they wrote. No follow-up, no explanation. That night, the whistling came again. This time it started earlier, 12:47 a.m., and it was different, longer. The tune was more structured, like it had evolved somehow. It reminded me of a lullaby, but off-key, as if the notes were bent around a sadness I couldn't place. I didn't sleep the next morning. I bought a drain snake from the hardware store. I told myself I just wanted to clear whatever was down there. Maybe something organic had gotten stuck. Maybe that was the source of the sound. I waited until daylight and unscrewed the metal stopper grid. The hole beneath was narrow and dark, but I fed the coiled snake down slowly, foot by foot, 4 feet 5. I started hitting resistance. It wasn't a clog exactly. It felt like cloth, wet cloth, the kind that resists movement and slips around when you try to grasp it. I twisted harder, and then I heard something, a gasp, not from me, from the pipe. I yanked the snake out in panic. Nothing came with it, just a faint smell like mildew and something sweet rotting under sugar. I didn't go near the sink the rest of the day, but I started to notice other things. My toothbrush moved twice, just a couple inches from where I left it. Then the hand towel fell, not like it slipped from the rack, like it had been yanked. And the whistling, it was everywhere now, in the living room, radiator, the hallway vents, soft and distant, as if whatever made it was learning how to move. I called Mr. Fillmore the next day. "Hey, I just had a few questions about the unit." I said, "Any plumbing work done recently or history of issues?" He was quiet for a moment, then with a sigh, he said, "Is it the whistling?" My blood ran cold. "You've heard it?" I asked. "I've owned this building for 40 years. He said slowly that Unit 3B, it's always been the one. Something about the plumbing in that line, always been strange. I've replaced pipes, redone the whole system. Doesn't matter. What is it?" Another pause. "I don't know, but don't try to get rid of it. Just leave it alone. Don't feed it attention." Click. That night, I put duct tape over the sink drain. It didn't help it. One throw. The tape crinkled, peeled. Something pushed upward from inside the pipe slowly, and then the whistling returned, muffled, but there. And this time the melody ended in a word: closer. I didn't sleep at all. I tried staying at a friend's place for a night, just to get away. I told myself it was ridiculous. I needed sleep and distance. Maybe it was just stress, paranoia, but deep down I knew I wasn't imagining any of it. The silence at Mark's apartment was deafening. Not a creak, not a single hiss of air from a vent, just stillness that made me realize how wrong my apartment had become. Even in the quiet of the guest room, I couldn't stop listening for it. That faint whistle, that thread of sound that felt like it came from the bones of the building. I went back the next morning. I had to. I needed my laptop and some documents for work. I figured I'd be in and out 10 minutes tops. But something had changed. The duct tape on the sink was gone, peeled completely off, and not torn evenly, like something had deliberately unwrapped it curl by curl, like fingers had worked it loose with care. And then I noticed the floor just beneath the kitchen sink. The linoleum was darker than usual. I knelt closer and saw it wasn't just what it was: sticky. The faint coppery smell told me enough. Blood. It had seeped up, not dripped down, and there were streaks leading toward the baseboards, like something had dragged its hands across the floor, crawling out of the drain and into the rest of the apartment. I left the apartment again. This time, I didn't lock the door. I just shut it and walked until I found myself in the library on 14th. And man, it was one of the few places that still felt safe. I started researching sounds, plumbing folklore, even urban legends. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I found a name that chilled me the piper below. It was mentioned in an obscure scanned article from a 1986 copy of a local urban mythzine written by a man named Elliot Crane who vanished. Later that same year, his article described buildings, mostly older ones, that were built over a particular line of buried piping, not sewer, not water, but something else. No one could trace them physically. They didn't exist in city plans, but those who lived above them reported things whistling in the night. Plumbing that bled, voices rising from drains. The article described a being that wasn't a ghost or a creature, but something old, something that used pipes as veins and drains as mouths. It didn't enter the home so much as seep through it, whisper by whisper, breath by breath. It lured attention, it fed on it. And once acknowledged, it grew. The last paragraph was scrawled hastily: "Do not look down the drain. Do not whistle back. Do not name it." I printed the article and brought it home with me. That was probably my first mistake, bringing the name back into the space. That night, the kitchen faucet turned on by itself. I was lying in bed exhausted when I heard the steady stream of water. I crept out and saw the handle turned all the way, but no one else was there, and the water was brown like runoff from rusted iron, or something worse. Then the smell hit me sharp and immediate, like old teeth and wet copper, and beneath it the sound of something hollow. I turned the faucet off with trembling hands, and in the silence I heard it, the whistle, not from the sink this time, but from the wall. It was moving. The next morning, I started pulling back pieces of the baseboard near the floor. With a screwdriver, the wood came off too easily, as if it wanted to come loose behind. It was damp drywall, and behind that soft spots that gave way when I pressed until I found a cavity just big enough to fit a small camera. I used my phone flashlight and held it to the hole. The space behind was narrow and black and deep, but something moved back there, something white and thin like a hand, but reversed, bent, wrong, shivering in a slow rhythm, like it breathed with effort and pain. Then it retreated into the dark, and the whistling stopped. I sealed the wall back up as best I could, but I knew it didn't matter. It had been behind the walls all along. I stopped using the sink altogether. After that, I put a bowl over the drain, kept the lights on in every room I could, and I played music just loud enough to cover the silences, but not loud enough to drown out the sound I feared would creep in through the cracks. For 2 nights, it worked. No whistling, no dripping, no strange movements. For the first time in weeks, I almost believed it was over until the morning of the 3rd day, when I found something new in the kitchen. A puddle, not water, not blood, something else thick and clear like saliva, stretched in ropes from the sink drain across the counter and down the cabinet door, like something had tried to climb out and failed. I stood there just staring, and then I heard it from the bathroom. This time, not a whistle, a voice. It said my name, not shouted, not whispered. It sang it like a lullaby, over and over like a chant. I walked toward it, even though every part of me screamed to leave. I pushed open the door, and the air inside was freezing, colder than the rest of the apartment, like the heat had been sucked out. And behind the curtain of the tub, the sound grew louder. I grabbed the edge and pulled it back fast, but nothing was there, just the tub, dry, clean, ordinary. And then the water from the faucet began to gurgle, and the voice returned, but this time it was pleading, "Let me out, let me out, let me out." I ran from the bathroom and locked the door behind me. And for the first time since all this began, I cried. I thought about calling someone, anyone, a plumber, the police, a priest, but I knew how it would sound. I'd be the crazy one, paranoid, delusional, but I wasn't. I knew what I heard, what I saw, what I felt behind the walls under the floors, inside the pipes. That night the whistle came again, but now it was layered beneath it. I could hear scratching like nails on metal. Something was moving through the plumbing, dragging itself inch by inch toward me. I covered the drain with a heavy pot this time, weighted it with books, and braced a chair against the cabinet. And I slept on the couch, light on, phone clutched in hand. I dreamed of water, not calm, flowing water, but churning, deep, murky, full of things that watch from the bottom. I stood on a pier alone, and the wind carried that same broken lullaby across the surface until something rose up from beneath, pale and thin and grinning. It held a finger to its lips and said, SHH. When I woke, my mouth tasted like iron, and I was bleeding from the gums. I went to the mirror, and I swear I saw movement behind me, just a flicker, something low crawling just past the doorway. But when I turned, it was gone, but the smell lingered. I opened every cabinet in the kitchen, and every vent. I pulled up the carpet. I searched for any sign, any entry point, but I found nothing. And then I heard the knock from inside the sink, one slow, deliberate knock, then silence. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next thing in the pipes was learning me, learning my rhythms. It knew when I was awake, and when I wasn't, it waited until I was weakest to make itself known. And I could feel it now, even when it wasn't making sound. I could feel it watching from under the drain, like I was pressed against a grate. And then came a message written in droplets across the bathroom mirror. You heard me. I stopped looking at mirrors after that morning. I covered the one in the bathroom with an old towel and used the hallway light and my phone screen for everything else. There was something about the words on that glass, something wrong with how the letters curved, as though they were shaped by fingers that had never been human. That entire day, I avoided the sink. I didn't cook. I didn't clean. I even walked outside for most of the afternoon, pretending like sunlight could keep it away. But when I returned just after sundown, I saw it again in the kitchen. Not the thing itself, not yet, but a sign. The heavy pot I'd placed over the sink was on the floor, not toppled, not tipped, but set down gently like someone had moved it with care. I walked slowly to the sink and stared down. There was something resting just inside the drain. At first, I thought it was a string, but when I leaned and I saw, it was hair, matted, wet black, and wrapped around the metal grate like it had been pulled loose as something retreated back inside. I dropped the pot back over it and left it there. I didn't sleep again. I couldn't. The whistle came back, this time a melody, but broken. Wrong, like a song heard underwater. It didn't belong to any tune I knew, but it stuck in my head, infecting my thoughts. I found myself humming it without realizing it, even whispering it in my sleep, and I knew that wasn't normal that night. I woke up on the floor of the hallway with soil on my hands and water on my shirt. My front door was still locked from the inside. I had no idea how I'd ended up there. My fingernails were dirty. I had dug at something. I checked every inch of my skin for wounds, but there were none. The only thing I found was a small mark on my left shoulder that hadn't been there before, a perfect round bruise like the imprint of a small wet mouth. Then came the dreams again, but they weren't dreams anymore. I stood in my kitchen, but it wasn't really mine. It was flooded. The walls pulsed like lungs, breathing, and every faucet, every pipe, every drain wept clear fluid that smelled like spoiled meat. And in the center of the room, a figure bent over, backward, its hands dragging along the floor. It moved without footsteps, without breath. And when it turned, its face was mine, but twisted, stretched wide into an expression that could never exist on a human face. It opened its mouth, and that whistle came out louder than ever. Impossibly loud. I woke up screaming, and the whistle was still there, not in my head. In the room, it was real. I grabbed my phone, opened a recorder, and hit record, shaking hands, capturing it, the sound, the rhythm. It was different this time. There were layers to it under the whistle, were words I couldn't make them out, but I knew they were there. That recording became my obsession. I looped it, I slowed it, I analyzed it until I started to hear them phrases. And the distortion whispered just under the sound of air. Through metal, let me up, let me see, let me wear your face. I stopped eating. I stopped working. All I did was listen until the last whisper, we're the same. I shut off the recorder and threw the phone into the toilet. I flushed it and watched it spin and vanish like the rest of my sanity. But even after it was gone, the whistle kept going that night. I caught it, not the thing, not exactly, but evidence. I set up an old camera, one of those that record directly to SD, no connection to the cloud, no why. I placed it in the hallway just outside the kitchen and hit record at 3:17, and I woke to silence. It was more terrifying than any sound. When I checked the footage the next morning, I found only static at first, then movement slow. Deliberate something rising just out of frame, a hand, not wet, not decayed, but gray, bloated like something submerged too long. It gripped the edge of the counter, and then another hand, then a head, slick, glistening, featureless, except for two deep slits where I should have been, and the faint shimmer of teeth. It looked around as if it was checking for me. Then it turned toward the camera and smiled to take cut there. I left the apartment. After that, I went to a motel 3 towns over, didn't tell anyone where I was, didn't pack, just walked out the door and never turned back. But the whistle followed me, not every night, just often enough to remind me it knew where I was. And the sink in the motel room, it started gurgling too. I stayed in the motel as long as I could, but the money ran out faster than I expected, and the longer I stayed, the worse it got. At first, it was just the gurgling, then the water pressure would drop randomly, then come roaring back, hissing through the pipes like steam from a dying animal. Then came the dreams again. This time I couldn't wake up. I was back in the apartment every time, except it wasn't my apartment anymore. It was flooded wall to wall, and something was waiting at the bottom of the water. I couldn't see it, only feel it, and I could feel it watching me with the patience of something that doesn't die. I started sleeping with my shoes on. I kept my keys in my hand because I knew eventually I'd have to run again. And then one night I did, because it touched me. I woke to pressure on my chest, like hands not crushing, just resting cold and uninvited. And I heard it, that terrible whistle, not from the sink, not from the drain, but from inside my own mouth. I wasn't whistling. It was using me. I ran barefoot to the street and collapsed under a street light. I didn't go back for my things. I left everything behind: phone, clothes, ID. I was just a man in dirty sweatpants and an old jacket, and no one would look me in the eye. I found a shelter after 3 days, and they let me sleep there. But even in that place full of noise and strangers, I still heard it in the radiators, in the shower drain, in the toilet tank, a low, curling whistle like steam escaping a throat that had never known breath. I met a man there who said he'd heard something like it once. He told me about a building uptown, an old place torn down in the 70s, where tenants reported voices in the sinks and shadowy faces behind the mirrors. He said it was all connected. He said things lived in the plumbing. Ancient things older than the brick and metal that contained them, now things that waited. I believed him because I had no choice then. He vanished, just gone one morning. No one knew his name, no one remembered him. But me, I found his bunk empty, his clothes folded on the bed, and one word written in toothpaste on the cracked tile behind the faucet run. So I did again. I found myself wandering further every day, like I was being pushed out of society, out of time. I stopped trying to sleep. I stopped trying to eat. I just walked, and the whistle followed, always just behind me. And then one day, I stopped running. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe I'd gone too far. Maybe I lost too much. But I found an old house abandoned long ago in the woods behind a crumbling neighborhood. and I broke and there was no power, no water, just silence. I went to the kitchen and found a sink rusted, stained, ancient, and I sat on the floor in front of it, and I waited. I didn't wait. Long it started as a rattle deep in the pipes, then a low groan, then the whistle long and winding and mournful, and then the sound of something dragging itself up toward the light. The air went cold, my breath fogged, and the lights flickered even though there were no bulbs. The drain trembled, and then something emerged. It was not a hand, not a face, not a form I could understand. It was like a veil of water in the shape of something wrong. It hovered just above the drain, and I felt it push into my mind like a knife made of sound. And it showed me where it came from, beneath us, under the cities, through the pipes and the veins of our buildings, deep tunnels lined with teeth and eyes and mouths that whistle, things older than memory, things that whisper, through water, things that wait for the right one to listen back. And I did. That was my mistake. It didn't want to kill me. It wanted to be me. The moment I heard that whistle and wondered what it was, I became its vessel, its outlet, its speaker. Now, wherever I go, it follows, because it is me. I write this now in a library terminal in a city. I don't recognize my hands shake, but they're not mine anymore. They move the way they want. They type what they choose. I am only here for a moment. I want to warn you. I have to. If you hear a whistle from a sink, from a drain, from behind the walls, ignore it, forget it, don't listen, because if you do, it will know you. And once it knows your name, it will come. And when it does, it will be patient. It will be kind. It will be inside. And one day someone will find a sink somewhere, maybe in your home, maybe far from here. And they will hear something strange, something soft and wet. And it will sound like your voice trying to get out.